If you struggle in the side control position, then this walkthrough is for you. We're going to look at how you can keep position, how you can stop losing position or getting rolled or letting them recover, and what we're looking at when we get to side control. So the first thing to think about is the far arm. And if you think of it as a ledge, so if I'm in my position here and I'm just peeking over the ledge, I don't want to fall off the ledge, then it's much harder for them to drive me this way. All right, whereas if I'm keeping my head over the ledge, my partner can push me over this way and roll me off, which is what happens a lot when we first start. So think about just getting to the point where you're peeking over that ledge, and then think about your hips. If my hips are higher than my head here, it's much easier for them to send me over that way. Whereas if I can adjust and drop my hips, or even better, drop my hips like this, then it's going to be much harder for them to push me off. And also I'm not giving them space for their knee here on this side for them to recover guard. So then we're thinking about our pressure. All right, so people say drop your pressure. What they mean is, they don't mean just drop this way, but they mean drive that pressure through here. So I'm looking at almost like I'm trying to roll my opponent away. Again, I'm poking or peeking over that ledge, and my hips are low now. Now I'm driving my pressure through them, but they can't roll me over this way. Then this knee is off the mat whilst we're trying to keep position. I'm pushing my toes into the mat, and again, I'm driving through here. This doesn't take too much energy for me, and I'm going to feel even heavier on my partner here. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is this crossface. All right, driving your pressure through them and how we can use that effectively. So right now, if I get down here, this is all right, but if I walk my hand further this way and then think to lean into that, it's much tighter when I close that angle. A lot of people you see as well, they'll go for their crossface and they'll lean. Yeah, I'm putting my shoulder in more, but I'm not actually changing that elbow between my shoulder and my wrist. I'm just lifting it and it's staying the same. So what we want to do here is walk through and then keep our elbow on the mat and drive that pressure through. That's going to make it harder for them to turn to look at me. So it's going to make it harder for them to recover into their guard. So now that we've covered everything on this end, we're going to look at their hips and what we're looking at with their hips. So if I exaggerate this, again, if we're here, we've got our hips nice and high. Okay, it's going to make it really easy for him to get this knee back in and start to recover. All right, whereas if my hips are lower, even if I'm not blocking anything yet, if he starts to bring his knee in, my hips are lower, so that's going to be harder to do. But now, if I also bring this knee up to block the hips, and I've got my hips low and I'm driving that pressure through, it's very hard for him to recover here. He's going to have to start shrimping away and creating space, and that's when I start to follow him as well with my knee. The other thing we can do is we can use our hand to block the hips as well. So if he's moving away a lot, away from my knee, if I use my hand here, it's very hard for him to turn and get this knee in, and it gives me an opportunity to follow him around in that side control position. So try and think as a rule for your side control, keep driving your pressure through them, not over them, and not just straight down. Try and block the hips with something, so a knee or a hand. Sometimes you'll be transitioning to things like mount, where we switch here. I don't just switch like this, because if I switch like this, on the way he can start to get this knee through and start to recover. So if you're moving whatever's blocking the hips, use something else there, and it's going to be really hard for him to recover there. And then the other thing we need to try and remember is that cross-face pressure. So how are we driving that through? How we're driving that through effectively, and we're making sure we're closing that angle between our shoulder and our wrist. We're not just effectively lifting our elbow up. So keep your forearm on the mat if you can. So that's really useful in terms of a basic side control. Another version of side control that I quite like is this crossbody style. So if I'm here and my opponent is doing a really good job at turning into me and lifting this shoulder, I sometimes switch to like a crossbody style side control. So I'll bring this arm over, and we use this when we're transitioning to mount and things as well. But when I bring this arm over, I'm heavy over him here. Again, think of that ledge. I'm not over here because he's going to roll me off. I'm still driving that pressure through and I'm peeking over the ledge. One thing people do when they get here is they get over the shoulder or on top of it. Whereas if my opponent gets an underhook here, this underhook is way deeper, so he can drive me off of him. Whereas if I reach over the outside of the arm here, now if he's got an underhook, it's harder for him to drive because it's not as deep. So here I might be able to control it and the hip, whereas here he can start to turn easier into me. So if you're going for that crossbody control, make sure you're over their body here. And again, if you are switching for mount transitions, you're using your hand to cover the hip as you switch your knees. Otherwise, they're potentially going to slide that knee in and recover. So now that that's basic position for side control, let's look at a couple of escape options for them and what we're looking at, or what they're looking at in order to escape. So the first thing here we've covered would be the recovering guard. So my opponent starts to shrimp their hips away and get their knee in. So if he shrimps away and gets his knee in here, he can start to recover back to closed guard and all sorts. So now that we know getting that knee in is their option, I need to make sure my knee or something is blocking their hip as they start shrimping. So if he shrimps to create some space here, I need to follow him round and close that gap as he's opening it. Now, again, we've talked about crossface, driving them through, but why is that important? We don't want him turning to look at us so that he can recover, but also if he gets an underhook here and he makes use of that, he can start driving into me, working out and coming up here. So keep your underhook. There's a big battle for underhooks when we're in side control here, so that they can't swim through, get theirs, and start to create space with it. Another fairly common escape, or flashy escape, that people go for would be the ghost. In order for Diggs to get the ghost escape though, he needs my arm this side of him so that he can start swimming through. So then his arm comes across here, then he starts to turn this way and come out. So now that we know that, if I've reached over this way, I know that ghost escape is an option. So if they start swimming their near arm towards the hip, that's what helps him turn through for that escape. So we need to prepare for that. So if he starts to reach through here, we're going to work on getting our cross face back and stopping his head from going under my hips. So in terms of basic attacks and things that you can go for from your top side control position, whilst you're thinking about all the things we've looked at, keeping top control, keeping them from escaping, now that we're aware of some of their escapes and stuff, whilst you're keeping your position here, if you start to focus on the far arm and what the far arm's doing, we've got plenty of different options for submissions. We can obviously start to think about transitioning to mount, or hopefully they're going to give their back up. But if you're focusing on what this arm's doing and a few things we can look at here, then hopefully you're going to keep position and get a submission from this. We've got things like, if the arm's pushing into us here, we could push through, go for arm triangles and come around to mount. Or if he's swimming for an underhook, I could start to come around for a kimura. So then if we're keeping position here, the way we've just looked at, and just attacking this arm, then we're limiting their options, and then we've got a few options we can go for that are safe. We're not making too many transitions yet and creating loads of space for them to take advantage of. So as a basic start for your side control, get to your position, think about all those things we just looked at, start to try and attack this far arm. You may not get as many submissions, but it's limiting their options, and hopefully you're going to be more successful.